I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who is going to talk about golden mussels throughout the state. And Martha Volkoff is the Environmental Program Manager with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. She's in the Fisheries Branch Invasive Species Program. She's native to Sacramento, educated at Sacramento State University, and has both bachelor's and master's of scientists in biology. And I will add that Martha, in the recent past, was the chair of the California Invasive Species Advisory Council. So welcome, Martha, and please start.
Thank you very much. And just sorry, one minor correction. Chair of the Invasive Species Advisory Committee, not the council itself, which is the Secretaries of Agriculture. Don't want to take their credit for their jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share information about golden mussels today. And unfortunately, golden mussels are a topic because they are new to California. Okay. And an overview of invasive mussels generally, we'll start there. Golden mussels is a new addition to California, along with quagga and zebra mussels, which have been present in California back to 2007 and 2008. They were detected in Southern California by way of Lake Mead and the Colorado River Aqueduct, and have been present in many reservoirs in Southern California. And I will take this moment to make the important note that the state of California has effectively prevented a widespread spread of these two species in the state of California. And I think that's important to keep in mind as I embark on the rest of the content about golden mussels. This is a very concerning development. However, there's much to be done, and I will wrap up with some calls to action from those of you here in attendance today. So generally speaking, excuse me, across all the three species present in California, they are all fresh or brackish water, small bivalves, typically not exceeding 2 inches in their longest length. They are a mussel that forms byssal threads, which enables them to firmly attach to hard and semi-hard substrates. And as a result, they form colonies and biofoul on surfaces, which, in addition to their biological presence, that biofouling creates quite a few problems that I will get more into in the coming slides. Something about that is consistent with many invasive species is that these three species are pretty tolerant of a wide range of environmental conditions, many of which California affords to them. And they also have high reproductive and growth rates. Again, another biological characteristic of many invasive species, and what makes them invasive species. And so these aquatic species are filter feeders, so they're not necessarily preying on other species. However, they can have significant effects on the environment through these large colonies and filtering, feeding, and also their waste products can alter water quality and then change entire ecosystems. Not just physically from that biofouling, but also in terms of their biological role in an ecosystem. So narrowing back to golden mussels specifically, golden mussels are native to China and Southeast Asia and are a known global invader and have established in Hong Kong, Japan, and several countries around South America, coastal. And these non-native infestations have likely been the result of ballast water or hull fouling of transoceanic shipping and are likely the source of introduction into California. One thing that is different about golden mussel than quagga zebra mussels is golden mussels have a significantly lower calcium requirement than quagga and zebra mussels do, which means that while there were some parts of California with low calcium, typically the waters that are based from granite substrates have lower calcium. This lower requirement for calcium of golden mussels means that most of California water bodies, with some few exceptions, are vulnerable to golden mussel establishment. And when I say establishment, I mean completing their life cycle, which I'll get into a little bit more in a coming slide. And while our context here is California, I think it's important to recognize the significance of this detection. This is the first detection in North America. And again, I mentioned the wide tolerance of golden mussels. We should be thinking about the rest of the US in terms of the vulnerability to other states and the significant impacts that golden mussels visit. Segue into those impacts, I've really classified those into three major categories, with the fourth being just the general collective impact of each of these individual impacts. So I mentioned as they invade our environment, some of which are already highly invaded, but there are native species, game species, that are important to the state of California and to that ecosystem health. We anticipate that golden mussel will affect species directly, communities, and the ecosystem-wide health of our environments throughout California, both natural and man-made, like reservoirs. They are also affecting, and we're feeling this very strongly right now as the boating season and recreating season kicks off in California, that water bodies are closing temporarily, hopefully, as they stand up prevention programs to prevent introductions. But this change of the environment may long-term affect the desirability of California for recreational activities, not just for our residents, but in terms of tourism. Another very significant impact of golden mussels and quagga zebra mussels is their impact on the infrastructure of the state. And as many of you are well aware, California's is really dependent on a complex network of water conveyance systems to get water in water-rich areas of the state into more arid areas. So we have a very highly developed and somewhat vulnerable, certainly vulnerable to dreissenid or invasive mussel biofouling in terms of dam operations, all of the pumping plants associated with moving water, and even small water diversions throughout the state, huge and individual water intakes, as well as those dams and serving hydropower energy production. In addition, public safety, I think, merits being called out directly in terms of some of this infrastructure is critical to our flood control and fire protection, as well as that water quality and security down to the individual homeowner and tap beyond the infrastructure conveyance. and rolling all of those things in terms of effects to the environment, agriculture, industry, this is a significant concern to the overall health and well-being of California's economy. So to bring you up to speed on where golden mussel have been, and now I'm just limiting my presentation to golden mussel, the new detections since October of 2024 have been limited to in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and in the state and federal water projects, which are the dots. So there's the cluster up in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta area, and detections of adult mussels have been made since October at O'Neill Forebay, which is a forebay of the state water project, and in points within the state water project as water is moved, and the federal water project that have canals that run parallel to the Diablo Range to move water into the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley, and the state water project continuing southward down into Southern California. And so some of these notable points on the state water project where these detections have occurred are called out in the bulleted list. And this map is available in real time. This one's date stamped May 19th. When I pulled it, it hasn't significantly changed since then, but you can find an interactive map that gives you details on each of these detection points on the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website. So how do these mussels move? I mentioned that we believe the first introduction was by way of a transoceanic ship and ballast water into the port of Stockton, and that was the first. Nearby that location was the first detection of golden mussels. But there are two, if we're going to put them in baskets, of pathways for the spread, and that we anticipate, and looking ahead into what we expect, is we expect through interconnected waterways, golden mussels will spread within the delta and tributaries to the delta. And that occurs through flowing water, either the veliger form, and I have a slide to talk about their life cycle in a moment, but essentially downstream flow of water carrying juvenile and even adult mussels. They do detach from surfaces and translocate, seeking out a more preferable settlement site. So we know that happens. And we know that happens because large mussels show up on surfaces that had no mussels, within a week or so before being observed. We also know that there is significant movement in the delta. It's highly interconnected. There's lots of recreational watercraft movement, equipment movement, and so we expect those human-mediated movements of mussels upstream. And the question mark I had in preparing this slide was, what role may wildlife contribute in terms of fish? There is evidence in other invaded countries that wildlife, fish particularly, can consume mussels that close up and can pass through their digestive tract and be expelled on the other end alive. So I mentioned the water conveyance system. We anticipate that water movement flow will result in infestations throughout that system. The State Department of Water Resources is working on methods to maintain operation of their system to reduce mussel biofouling and maintain that system. That's outside of the scope of work that I'm specifically involved in, but just want to make the note of relative to these two water conveyance systems and the breadth over the state of California that they span. These photos are from O'Neill Forebay, where I mentioned is one of the Forebay to San Luis Reservoir. It's part of the State Water Project where water is queued up, if you will, and they are seeing a robust growing population of golden mussels. And these are great photographs, and I should have mentioned from the onset, DWR has a great collection of photographs, and I thank them for allowing me to borrow from their photographs. But this is what the photo on the left is pulling up a buoy that I believe is like a no-wake navigation buoy. And you see on the lower end of the rope where it attaches to that white buoy, golden mussels are accumulating in colonies, and they prefer shaded areas, but also in where the gal is pointing with the blue glove is that little out spout thing in the design of that buoy. I'm not sure what the purpose is of it, but you can see the preference. These mussels have a strong preference for being out of direct sunlight and in sort of a little shaded area. And then notable, the clogging up of that whole fitting, that even though water isn't actively being moved through there, they are seeking refuge in that preferentially, even to their own, probably poor choice there on growing up and their fate there. So the other significant pathway, and this is where, while we don't have control over those large water conveyances, we do have an opportunity to intervene in the overland spread of golden mussels out from the delta. And this overland spread can occur by adult mussels, biofouled or attached onto watercraft or equipment, or in materials removed from infested waters. So in this example, this cat machine lifting up this vegetation, that backhoe or whatever piece of equipment that is, number one, it's touching the water, and then all that material it is removing from an aquatic environment. Those are two opportunities for the overland spread of mussels potentially. So taking precautions to prevent activities that occur in water in addition to recreational watercraft is two real opportunities we have to prevent the spread of golden mussels out of the delta and into other waters of the state and nation. So I teased you with hearing about the life cycle of these mussels, and it's important to note that they have a larval stage. They are broadcast spawners, so the adult settled mussels release eggs and sperm into the water column. Those, if they find each other, fertilization occurs, and those fertilized eggs go through several developmental stages that is driven by water temperature. And so that rate of development can be variable. And it also is an opportunity for mussels to spread by being microscopic in entrapped water. So there is the adult mussel settling on surfaces. That is one means by which they can spread, but the other important means is in entrapped water. And that's why these watercraft inspection programs have the clean, drain, dry mantra, which really is a good and general practice that doesn't just apply to watercraft. It applies to that backhoe and equipment and anything removed from an aquatic environment. So drain all of those reservoirs that hold water or could hold water and allow them to dry before using in another water body. So what is the state doing in response to this detection of golden mussels in the Delta? The Department of Fish and Wildlife has led establishment of the Golden Mussel Task Force based on our existing role and responsibility analogous to quagga and zebra mussel program for the state of California. There really are multiple agencies affected by this. Dry-scented mussels back in the mid-2000s, 2008. And so it really is a multi-agency problem and solution. And so the Golden Mussel Task Force pulled together other state and federal agencies, representative of those other capacities in the state and federal government affected and with authority to manage and move forward addressing golden mussels. So the task force formed several teams that in some cases those activities were in progress, and for others it established new teams. So from day one we embarked on monitoring to determine the distribution of golden mussels in the Delta, monitoring outside of the Delta, looking for golden mussels and quagga zebra mussels. We revised our outreach primary piece of outreach material. And in addition, the task force created a team from representatives across agencies. The Department of Fish and Wildlife doubled up on its working with local water managers to support them in establishing prevention programs if they didn't already have those programs in place. We've assembled a diverse group of partners to participate in channeling information up to the task force, as well as undertaking efforts independently and in partnership with the task force, and identifying and pursuing science needs and capacity across the response. And that task force and those teams culminated in the creation of a response framework document, which was published on April 14th of 2005, that identified these objectives for moving forward. And again, recognizing that some of those objectives were well in progress and needed to continue. And so many of those teams, these teams continue to meet and work within, and this is very notable, within the states and federal government's existing capacity. To date, we have, with the exception of a grant opportunity for other agencies implementing mussel containment and prevention, we are operating on existing state resources within my department and other members of the task force. But the response strategy did call out opportunities for funding as well as needed authority. because we are, again, also continuing to operate on limited authority that is not equivalent to quagga zebra mussel authority. And I'll have a slide. The two very important objectives relative to these current limitations that we are not making movement on is containment actions of golden mussels in the Delta, or any sort of population suppression, with the exception of potentially the state water projects work to maintain their water conveyance system. No open water suppression, population suppression. I mentioned authorities, so what we currently are working under is the California Department of Food and Agriculture performed a pest rating on golden mussel, and their determination was an A rating. The Department of Fish and Wildlife added golden mussel to our restricted species list, which prohibits possession, transport of golden mussels. And State Lands Commission has worked to bolster their ballast water regulations. And I should note the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has published a federal notice to add golden mussels among a couple of other genera to the injurious species list, and that is pending. So some details on moving. What we've been working on in those teams is we're developing an outreach plan that prioritizes needs and targets specific audiences. And in addition, there have been some specific pieces of outreach material drafted and in some case published, some signage, and really working to identify partners through which we can reach greater audiences. I mentioned we have been working with water managers to assist them in standing up prevention programs, and by prevention programs, I mean boat inspection programs. Again, they're funding and staff limited, and so this has been a heavy ask of them, and you may be hearing of interceptions, and that those are attributable to these prevention programs and other closures that are the result of those agencies not having the instantaneous capacity to stand up programs. There have been some funding opportunities, a drop in the bucket really relative to the need from the Division of Boating and Waterways annual quagga zebra mussel prevention grant program, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife made it available a portion of our Sport Fish Restoration Act boater access grant. Both of those opportunities are closed for this year, but subscribe to our email list if you wish to receive further notifications on opportunities such as those. Monitoring, we're doing early detection monitoring statewide. In the Delta, the Department of Water Resources went back in time and analyzed archive samples from 2023 and 2024 by way of eDNA, and had positive eDNA detections in the Delta. And what this indicates is, obviously, October 2024 was not day one of golden mussels in the Delta. So there is the real potential that watercraft have moved golden mussels out of the Delta. And my fear is that we will begin to see detections outside of that interconnected water from spread before we knew golden mussels were present in California. And not a high priority given limited capacity, but we also would like and are doing what we can to track trends and expansion within the Delta. And again, that's many agencies doing that work. with California or the Department of Fish and Wildlife, trying to channel all that information on our online platform so it's accessible to everyone who's conducting monitoring or prevention programs. I mentioned our partner engagement. We have members from throughout agencies and private sector and local, federal, and state. And so if you're interested in being part of the solution and helping, we welcome you to join our partners team. And then another aspect where we have been working, again, to meet the management need, we prioritized those research questions that are of immediate management need. These priorities are defined in the framework document, but those are: number one, villager identification. We have a strong skill set in identifying quagga and zebra mussel, but the question remains is, can you differentiate quagga zebra from golden mussel? So knowing with certainty whether genetic analysis of that villager is necessary is something we're working on. We're also repeating a research that we did on quagga zebra villager survival in entrapped water and adult mussel survival out of water, again, to answer the question, is this species as robust or more robust than quagga zebra mussels relative to the risk of spread and also decontamination of watercraft, the time and temperature recommendations that we operate under for quagga zebra mussels. Does that also provide a lethal kill for golden mussels? And some other partners are looking and interested in salinity tolerance and chemical application to golden mussels. So, how can you assist and take action and promote action by others? Number one, I ask you to spread the word and the concern that I've shared with you today about the broad impacts that golden mussel can have across sectors in California. Number two, if you work in a context where you anticipate potential impacts, work to proactively prepare for those and engage others in preparing for those and advocating for the resources necessary to prepare. Third, promote and implement our primary prevention tool, which is to clean, drain, and dry. And again, for this audience, that's not just watercraft, it's everything, and it's every time it's used in a water body. Like the Delta, where there's a lag time between when it was established and when we detected it in October 2024. Just because you think it's not there doesn't mean it's there. And so we must normalize clean, drain, dry in all of our in-water activities and promote that with recreationalists and environmental professionals, and look for opportunities where we may have some regulatory control over that in contracts and mandating decontamination before you arrive and upon leaving the job site. So think broadly within your context about how clean, drain, and dry can be applied to your context. And fourth, look for invasive mussels statewide. Again, the focus is on the Delta right now, but that doesn't mean they haven't been introduced, and not just this species, but other species of biofouling mussels. We have a reporting email and telephone number. By all means, send us a picture. That's often great. I would rather receive reports that we can take a look at a photograph and say, not a mussel. Thank you. But it begins with eyes in the field to look, and our regional scientists can provide more training on what to look for and how to monitor if you're interested in adopting and contributing to our monitoring. We're tracking non-detects just as much equally as we're documenting detects. All right, and with that, I will turn it back to our facilitators. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I sure learned a lot, and I hope everyone else at this webinar did as well. So we do have time for questions. We ask that you please put them in the Q&A. And Randall, you ready to take those questions?
Absolutely, and we have one that was put in the chat. Rachel Becker at Cal Matters asks, is there any hope of containing golden mussels now that they're in the Delta and key parts of the State Water Project? And did you also say the CVP?
They're essentially, they receive the same water source. Most reports that we've received, and those dots on that map, have been State Water Project locations, but I believe that CVP is equally impacted and a conduit for mussels.
And is there hope of containing them?
It depends how you define containment. Again, containment of overland spread, yes, there is much work to be done there. I think it is possible and effective. And containment, well, the way we define containment in the, again, that's another, depends who you ask what that means. The way we defined it in the framework document is containing within the infested area. And there is that element, I think, an important message, and thank you for this question that prompts me to talk about this conceptually, is stopping the further spread is a combination of tools. It's every tool we've got in the toolbox to contain them within the area at this moment. We don't have the resources to do that. In flowing water, we don't have the technology, the tools, or the resources. The overland spread, we have the tools. That is something that it is not insurmountable, but it's a combination. The statewide solution is a combination of containment and prevention. So if we cannot cast a comprehensive containment net around the Delta, you must also prevent to protect uninfested waters. And while that's not the ideal efficient, that is the reality of, maintaining the things that are important to California, the recreational opportunities in the Delta, the water conveyance. This is certainly not an ideal situation all around.
Next question, what authority does the State Lands Commission have in ballast water regulations as compared to the federal government? If federal ballast water regulations are less protective or effective in addressing the state's needs to manage this new invasive, whose regulations apply? And can the state enact more stringent regulations?
Not my area of expertise, but I have some knowledge. And I believe the case to be there are federal requirements. California has, let me back up, California has some of the strongest state ballast water requirements and regulatory contexts. However, the state does not supersede federal requirements that may be a little leaner than what the state of California would desire. And that is relative to considering the federal, the global economy and the federal role and the U.S. Coast Guard's role in setting some U.S. regulatory requirements. There are active discussions. I would encourage, if you really have interest and desire to have a greater understanding of that, to connect with State Lands Commission, and I'd be happy to connect someone individually. Feel free to email me directly or the Invasive's email, and I can put you in contact with the greatest expertise who does participate on our task force.
Okay, next question. The mainstream San Joaquin River and mainstream Sacramento River in the Bay Delta have regular channel maintenance dredging by the Army Corps. What impact can dredging have on the spread of these mussels, either by sending them further downstream or in reuse of dredged sediments in other areas? How will this be regulated and or these mussels monitored in dredging operations?
Good question. We don't have a member of the Corps of Engineers on our task force. The federal representative we have is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I think there's much work to be done in terms of partner engagement to ask specific questions like these. In terms of the downstream spread of golden mussels, I'm not sure that is a significant, makes things significantly worse, to be honest, because if there are mussels established in the work area for dredging, they're spawning, and the veligers and gametes will be moving downstream with the water. In some cases, if it's anything like weed management in the Delta, there is some value to them moving down and hitting salinities that is lethal for aquatic plants in that case. So without specific, I guess they mentioned mainstem Sacramento and San Joaquin. That may be outside of that footprint. And some of the control technologies actually within systems is only deterring settlement to protect from biofouling. So if you introduce a chemical that makes it inhospitable for settlement, in reality, what you are doing is just pushing the settlement downstream to protect that vulnerable facility function. But unfortunately, in this species, in this reality, maintaining that operation is a priority over that downstream.
You mentioned earlier the golden mussel detection real-time map. So somebody's asking, is there a consolidated real-time map of golden, quagga, and zebra mussel detections?
Not at this time. Although I will say all of the monitoring on the golden mussel database is for all mussels. So consider that, but the scope definitely is more focused on the Delta, and we just don't have the capacity to integrate our two mapping systems together at this time.
Are there any natural predators in California that feed on golden mussels?
I would anticipate some of our non-native game fish will probably pick at what we've seen in Southern California is centrarchids, so sunfish types, feeding on the juvenile, the smaller, not those adult. It's certainly nothing adequate to keep pace with the population of these invasive mussels.
Does the state have any plans to utilize inspection stations as a means of screening boats that are moving throughout the state? Says leaving it up to each water body manager is really not a realistic method of preventing the spread, and that's their opinion.
In the absence of capacity, funding, and staffing at this time, that's not on the horizon. I agree that, again, I mentioned a multifaceted approach is necessary. That is one thing that could help alleviate that pressure at those water bodies.
Sort of a related question. There are abandoned vessels in the Delta that are starting to be removed by some state agencies. Is there concern about removal of these vessels if they've not been inspected prior to being removed or motored to boat docks for removal?
I guess it would be a case by case. If it's within the infested area, really I have to triage in, is it a biological threat? So if a watercraft is removed from an infested area with mussels and taken to a dry land demolition location, it is not a threat to the spread of golden mussels. Is it ideal? No, but we have to be realistic about capacity to deal with any of those. Are we interested in regulating it as a restricted species movement? Again, not a priority given enforcement capacity. And what are you going to do? You're going to impound it and put it in a dry lot to hopefully desiccate. Now, if it was a derelict vessel that, or even a vessel that was sold with the intent of putting it in another water body, then yes, certainly that would be a situation where intervention should occur.
We are coming up on the hour. So if people need to leave, it's certainly appropriate at this point. Martha, are you available to stay a little bit longer to answer some more questions?
Sure.
Okay. And then I did figure out what was wrong with the polls earlier. So could I just take 1 minute to launch our demographic poll? This is solely for our information. And if people could please respond to this, that's very helpful. We're not going to share the results here during the meeting.
And Martha, while our audience is electing to answer these questions, have you sometime we have many more questions, and we're not expecting to get through all of them, but it's really dependent on your availability.
And I can go ahead and just go to a couple of these are related just to the clean, drain, dry, and kind of what do those terms mean? What's the significance of dry, clean? What does that mean? Is it cleaning with a solution or what's involved with that?
Sure. So for cleaning, it really is dependent on the equipment / watercraft. Effectively, what cleaning means is removing the organisms and biological matter off of the thing, the equipment, the watercraft. Draining means pulling the plug, allowing the thing to get to a state of dryness. And dryness is necessary, as I mentioned, that larval villager life stage that can survive in entrapped water for days. Making sure you drain water and getting the watercraft dry. So not only can they survive in sort of liquid water, they can survive in moist environments. And for adult mussels, those moist environments can prolong the length of time the adult and villager mussels can remain alive. So effectively, that is a environmentally benign way of removing the biological threat. We don't advocate chemical use for watercraft cleaning or large equipment cleaning, unless you're in a specific niche sort of scenario, for example, wildfire fighting equipment and planes, for a couple of reasons. What is the impact of those chemicals on that piece of equipment? We certainly don't want to reduce the life or impair the operation of some sort of chemical. And then there's the disposal concerns. So for cleaning, typically we recommend hot water if the piece of equipment can sustain the hot water. Sensitive instruments, that might not be appropriate, in which case drying would be your best alternative. So again, that is for the purpose of killing mussels, is the clean, drain, dry. And it's also a realistic recommendation for the recreational community. What we don't want them to do is go home, leave their boat wet or with water in it, or move it between water bodies, as that presents the potential for the spread of mussels.
Thank you. Kind of a related question. At what point in their life cycle do golden mussels attach to surfaces?
At the stage from when they're that planktonic villager life stage to when they move into a subadult, essentially. So they will not be sexually mature at the time they settle, but that is the beginning of development into the adult life stage.
We have a couple of questions about detection and identification monitoring. One question is about dogs. They've been proven effective in mussel detection. Do you know of any plans to increase mussel dog detection teams across the state?
Not that I'm aware of. Currently, the capacity is in the private sector of dog trainers and contracting out. I can't speak to whether they intend to expand.
Okay. And is environmental DNA assays for golden mussels being used across the state in lakes, reservoirs, et cetera, as a monitoring tool? And if not, will that be rolled out, and how would that happen, or how would it be funded?
Again, that's capacity limiting. I believe there are some, it's not consistent. I believe there is some efforts, water body dependent, but it is not a universal tool. I think it's also important to recognize that eDNA is not a silver bullet for monitoring. You can fail to detect eDNA when organisms are present, and potentially the sensitivity of eDNA, again, is detecting DNA, not necessarily organisms. And so there's the potential for a detection that is not indicative of an established population. So it augments but does not replace our conventional monitoring methods of surface surveys and plankton sampling.
Okay. Another attendee says he sees a lot of complaints online for reservoirs that have closed. The complaints in part because people think the temperatures are too cold in those mountain lakes. So why are they closed? And then just a comment that is this because temps are only too cold for breeding and they can survive in colder weather, colder water temperatures until warmer temps allow them to breed?
I can't speak to anybody's complaints about a program.
Okay.
Yes, I recognize there are a lot of, but I will fully recognize there are a lot of concerns with the closures. But I defer to the water managers' decision making in what their risk is relative to any environmental situation or their vulnerability of their.
Yeah, I think as I understand the question, it's more about how the water temperatures affect the mussels, and so that they're really asking, can they survive in cold water and then reproduce when the water warms up? Is my take on that question.
Yes. Well, yes, I don't believe there are really, oh, well, I don't want to speak out of turn. Are there limiting to temperatures for golden mussels? Yes. Is that for any given program, is that the case? Again, I can't speak details without knowledge of that individual location.
Okay. And Rachel Becker again, can you please go into more detail about how the golden mussels affect water quality? And are they more or less bad for water quality than zebra and quagga mussels?
I don't have a ton of specific details. I can't tell you comparatively. I'm not aware, and because any individual environment is unique, and any species result is probably unknown until it occurs. There is definitely from Eastern, and then how comparable is it to other countries where golden mussels have invaded versus quagga and zebra mussels in the United States, in California, Southern California versus the Delta? I think there's a lot of variables, and unfortunately, it's hard to predict the actual reality until it happens in an invaded environment. But quagga zebra mussels have been associated with algal blooms in the East Coast and changing water quality. So sorry, I don't have, that's not on the details I can really get into, but I welcome a follow-up conversation. It is certainly a concern, as I called out in the presentation.
I think you probably covered this one question is, are there any notable efforts by water agencies to limit or treat infestations?
By water agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's typical. If I look and speak holistically of all mussel infestations, so not just golden mussels, when you're in an infested situation, in Southern California, for example, they treat to maintain operation. It's not treat to remove or eradicate. It's to maintain their facility function.
And there's a question about regulations on bilge water discharge. Just are there regulations? I would point out that if somebody wants to look at last year's talks, we had Chris Shiani from the State Lands Commission who addressed that in pretty big detail.
Yes, and since you called his name out, he is our representative on the Golden Mussel Task Force.
Oh, okay.
And is the best to answer those questions, I think. And when you ask him that question, for whoever asked that, you'll want to identify whether it's commercial ballast or recreational, because that answer may be different based on that regulated community.
And that concludes all of our questions. Julie, you want to wrap this up?
Sure. Well, we thank all of you for coming today. Thank you for hanging in there and asking your robust questions. And Martha, of course, your expertise and rightfully differing some answers to other agencies that the questions are more the scope of. So we appreciate your time, Martha. Thank you, everyone else. And it'd be great if that you can join us Thursday or Friday this week for the next presentations at noon.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.